Good morning, everyone. I'd like to welcome you to our Small Business Matters webinar series. Today, we will be discussing workplace mental health. Before we get started, I'd love to thank our sponsors. Our champion sponsors are GTR Media Group, IBT, Southwestern Payroll, Tulsa Tech, Tulsa Drillers, Lamar Advertising, and our partners and advocates are Aero Exterminators, Hightower Business Solutions, and AVB Bank. As we get started, I'd like to remind you if you would like to share your name and contact information in the chat section, this will give you a chance to get to know the other people on the call. Before I introduce Dr. Leedy, I'd like to make you aware of a few upcoming webinars we have this week. Tomorrow we have Excelling Through the Chaos. This will be with Bill Fournette of the Persimmon Group. He will be discussing how to use your leadership capabilities moving through these uncertain times. We will also be having resources for workforce resiliency on Thursday. We'll be discussing many HR matters and ways to navigate through them. To register for those events, please go to our website and register. If you have problems with registering, please feel free to contact me, and I have put my contact information in the chat section. So as we get started, I'd like to introduce Dr. Melissa Leedy. She will be leading this webinar in mental health in the workplace during changing times. Dr. Leedy, please feel free to get started.
Okay, can everyone hear me okay? All right, good. Well, thanks for having me on, Lori. Today, what we're going to talk about is mental health in the workplace from an employer perspective as well from an employee perspective. I'm going to be presenting for about 20 to 30 minutes, and then we will have about 20 or 30 minutes for questions and discussion. So if you do have some questions, you can put them in the chat box or just hold them until we're done. Okay, so Lori, can you go to the next slide? All right, so first what I want to do is talk a little bit about the landscape that we have going on right now. You know, really we are in a place of crisis, of psychological crisis. And so that is important for you to know as a leader in your workplace, because the current culture, psychological culture, is definitely going to be playing into how your employees and how your team members, and even as you as an employer, how that is affecting your whole business flow and how you're communicating with your team. So the characteristics of a crisis are that there is sudden change, and with that sudden change comes a lot of uncertainty for a lot of different areas. Uncertainty, obviously, in healthcare, with job stability, with income flow, with just how your work is being done. And with that then becomes a lot of complexity as people are changing systems in the way that they work within your work, but also as your clients and as your patrons, as they, you know, still do business with you. There's a lot of complexity from their end and how they are seeing your business operate. So all three of those things really make it difficult for you as a leader in your job and just for your clientele. So we need to keep those things in mind, because that really is going to change the way that we operate and the way that we are resilient in terms of our mental health. Next slide. Okay, so first of all, it's important to know that when people are going through a crisis, they actually are taking in information differently than in other times when we know what to expect. So this is going to be really important for you to remember. And then the next slide, I'm going to talk about some ways that you can change your messaging and pivot things. So the first thing that happens is when we are going through a crisis. Well, and let me just say that it's also important for you to remember that you are going through this too. And so when you're listening today, think about, on one hand, this is what your team members are going through and your employees are going through, or your contractors. And on the other hand, you are also going through this at the same time. So it's complex to hold, because as you are trying to change your messaging, you also have to be aware that you're doing the same thing. You're taking in information the same way. So in crisis, we take in information differently than we do at other times. So on the very far left, you'll see that simply. So we don't fully hear all the information that we get. We only hear bits and pieces of it. And so that makes it really difficult if you're in leadership position, because you might be saying all kinds of stuff and you're thinking, why aren't they getting it? Why do they keep asking questions? Why are people being resistant? Well, they're not fully hearing what you're saying, because there's too much right now going on in people's minds. There's just information overload from the government, from healthcare, from employers, from the public schools. There's just information overload. So we are not fully hearing what the information we're getting. We also don't tend to remember as much. We tend to remember things that are presented to us first, or things that are presented to us last. So all the stuff in the middle, we're not going to remember very well. This is called the primacy effect, things that are happen first, and the recency effect, things that happen more recently. So that's going to be good for you to know as you tweak your messages to your team, that you want to start off a message with saying what you want them to remember or do, and you want to end with that same message. Okay. And then we also misinterpret confusing action messages. So when you're communicating, you don't want to give 3 and 4 and 5 different action messages in the same thing, because people's anxiety is so high right now. And again, they're getting flooded with information, just like you're getting flooded with information. And so if there's anything that seems slightly confusing or contradictory, they're just not going to know what to do with that. And again, the mental health aspect of this, with anxiety and depression being so high and uncertainty, you really want to think about, how you're communicating. Also, people tend to hold on to their current beliefs. So if people have a belief about the how they're working, or the belief about the mission of the company, they're not going to seek out other information. So if you say something like, well, just do the best you can, even though that's a well-intentioned statement, if people have beliefs that the best they can means they work 12 and 14 hours a day and they don't chunk their time or something like that, and their belief is I can just work the way I worked before, they're not going to talk to their supervisors or their colleagues or their peers about how do I do this different. So a lot of our beliefs, we like to have the stability of the beliefs that we held before, and it makes it difficult for us to change when we have times of uncertainty and high anxiety. The third column there, looking for additional information and opinions. One thing that's also really important to remember is that we tend to believe what we experience. Okay, so that's something that from our standpoint of just how we take in information, when we are feeling anxious, we're not going to really listen to what a lot of people say. If your employees have an experience and it's negative, then any other information, they're going to be filtering through that experience. If they have positive experiences right now in your company or with you as leadership, they are going to be perceiving information through that lens of their experience with you and with their team. And they also want to have multiple sources that confirm what you say. So don't be surprised if right now you are hearing, a lot of people saying, well, I talked to this person and this person and this person. That's really normal behavior right now, because people are looking for certainty and they are looking for confirmation. Okay. And then the very last column, I mentioned this earlier, that we believe the first message that we hear. So as things continue to evolve with how we are doing business right now, I would really encourage you to have one message that you are giving out, and if as much as possible, see if you can link that to however you first communicated with your team about how you were going to work, and then tweak those. Because they're going to be comparing everything you say with what you said the first time. And again, that's not, I think you've got to be really careful as a leader to not misperceive that, but just to understand that's an anxiety response, and people are just going to be checking in with what you said before. Next slide. Okay, so just to sum up, you as leadership, you really need to pivot your communication just a little bit. And just notice I said pivot, not make some major changes. But you need to use messaging that is simple and that you can repeat over time, so people are hearing the same messages over time. The messages need to come from leadership, because people are going to be, going to their colleagues and going to peers and Facebook and all kinds of different things. You as a leader want to make sure you are the one, when your leadership team is presenting the same message over and over. The third point, your messages need to be as specific and as consistent as possible. And I know this can be really hard when you're in leadership and you're in the same boat right now and you're trying to figure out, what is the message that I need to give my team? And I'm feeling anxious, or I'm struggling with all these changes. And it can be really hard when you're in that same boat to know, how do I support my team? So as much as you can simplify things down and try to come up with an overarching message for this time of the way that your company is working, the better that will be for you and for your mental health. And the better that will be also for your employees and your team. And then the last one is, make sure that if you do have updates to the information that you're sending out to your team, make sure that's as accurate as possible. And I know that can also be really hard, because things are changing so much and we don't always have all the right and the full information before we want to send an update to our team. But if you can, make sure that you're providing accurate information, and that whatever you're asking your team to do, that it's something positive and that it can be implemented. And so when I say something positive, I'm not meaning, a Pollyanna-ish message, an overly optimistic message that feels good but doesn't give much instruction. What I mean is, instead of saying, necessarily don't do X, Y, Z, you want to give your team messages that says, do this and do this and do this. Do your work over telehealth. Do use the paid version of Zoom. Do use this. Do be writing notes, or whatever you want them to do. Give them positive direction in that way, and things that can be implemented. Okay, next slide. Okay, so now I want to just talk to you a little bit about how to deal with the changes in the workplace, because there are so many changes right now and they have come on us fast and furious. So next slide, Lori. Okay, so when we're dealing with changes in the workplace, I want you to understand the emotional things that go on for people. And on the very left, you'll see that diagram with changes being in the middle. And this, from fear to confusion to relief to excitement, that's kind of the cycle that happens. Every time that there is a change, most people experience some degree of these things. And it's kind of like the stages of grief, if you all know about that. But we kind of cycle around and we just keep going with every change. So, the first reaction is really a fear response. Physically, people's body is reacting and their heart rate might be increasing. They might have more stomach problems at this point, nausea, things like that. And so they're just fearful of not knowing how to do it. They're fearful that they're going to mess up. They're fearful of technology. They're fearful that they didn't fully understand what you said. And that goes back to what I was saying at the very first couple of slides, that people aren't fully hearing and aren't fully remembering what you tell them. So anytime there's a change that happens, expect that there's going to be a lot of anxiety from the back end. And then as people, work on that, they go through this feeling of confusion. Once they actually start to implement it, the very first couple of times, there is a lot of confusion. How is it going to work? How is it going to work in this circumstance? What if the people that I'm talking to, they don't know how to do it this way? And just, there's so many different situations in our places of employment, and we're changing the way we do it. And so you should expect a lot of confusion. You yourself as a leader might also feel equally confused, and that can be hard because you don't know how to direct your team. And then we move on to the feeling of relief that once people start doing it, once people start practicing the new change, emotionally they're going to feel some relief, and they will start to feel increased competence and increased confidence. And then a lot of times they even move on to a feeling of excitement, that it's kind of exciting to think about how you can do something in a new way, and excited to see your business community supporting each other and seeing what your patrons and your clients, how they're responding. But then you need to expect that when there's a new change rolled out, if there's a new change rolled out, your employers and your team are probably going to go through the same cycle all over again. So just keep that in the forefront of your mind. And also, it might be helpful to recognize that people go through this cycle at different times. So some people might quickly move out of fear and past confusion to relief, and other people might be stuck in fear and confusion. And they might be stuck there because of how their mental health is right now. So that's just something that you always want to keep in mind. Don't expect everybody on your team to be moving through the cycle at the same time. There's a lot of individual factors for people that are going to kind of dictate where they're at and how they move through those things. So as an employer, what you want to tell your employers or employees is how you're going to do things, the why and the how. It's really important for their mental health that they understand why you're making the changes that they are, or that you are making, and what you want the outcome to be. And the reason why this is important is because if you have people on your team who are really invested in your team, they're going to take some personal ownership of how things are going. They might be taking personal ownership of their productivity and just the culture of things right now. And so they might, they might push themselves hard. And of course, they've got anxiety and grief and all kinds of things spinning around them. And if they are taking it personally, like you're making a change because they are not doing their job well, then that's further going to increase their anxiety. So if you're making a company-wide change or a team-specific change, make sure you explain why that is, so people don't take it personally and they can get on board with what you're saying. And then of course, like I said, definitely talk about the how. If you don't know all the aspects of the how, tell them as much as you know, and then tell them next week I'm going to give you an update. If there's changes we're going to be making, I'll give you an update. That way they know what to expect. Again, because people are really they're grasping for something certain. So even if you don't know what's coming up the next week, at least they can be certain that every Monday you're going to be providing them with an update. You need to model what you're asking for. So if you're asking for people to use a new system, or you're asking for people to manage their mental health or talk to their colleagues about how they're doing with their mental health, you need to let them know that you're doing the same thing. And that can be a hard thing to do because as leadership, you're in a very vulnerable position and you want to, portray a certain image that you've got it. And even if you do have it, that's great. But whatever you're asking your employees for, you need to model and let them know you're doing the same thing. That also really helps create the culture of we're in it together as a team culture instead of as everyone's on their own to figure it out. I already talked about providing regular updates. The rolling with resistance that's really important again in thinking about how people are going to be cycling through this fear, confusion, relief, and excitement. A lot of times how they're going through that again is based on how their current mental health is, but it's also based on how severely they believe they're going to be impacted by the change. So if you're, talking to somebody about moving to their home office, let's just say you've closed your physical space now and you've moved to their home office, and they don't really have a dedicated space in their house that they can work, or they have young children at home, or they typically do a lot of their work after hours, and now you're asking them to do a lot of their work during the day. However they perceive it's going to personally impact them is going to be a factor in where they're at on that cycle and how much they move through that. One thing that you can do to move this cycle, though, to an area of relief and excitement is to generate short-term wins. To really think about how are the changes that you are making in your company, how are they speaking to the general culture of your company and the values that you have, and really bring that to light, because that sense of support, that sense of solidarity with, despite all these changes, we still have this culture in place, that is a buffer for people's mental health struggles right now. And so you always want to think about, how can we see this through the lens of the company values and the company behavior? Next slide. Okay, so techniques for dealing with stress in a changing work environment. All right, this is something I really want you guys to look at carefully. We know, I was doing some research just in the area of mental health, psychology, and things like that. And in terms of crisis, one of the last recession we had in 2008, that financial crisis, there was actually quite a few studies that had come out. And some of the things that just kept coming up was that when people feel uncertain, that sense of uncertainty is the main driver for how stressed people feel and any mental health problems that follow. Okay, so let me just say that again. Uncertainty is the thing that is really going to be driving people's stress levels and their mental health problems. So if you think right now, we have so much uncertainty, like I said before, and you all are experiencing as well, uncertainty in our healthcare, uncertainty in the business market, uncertainty with our schools, just with our jobs, everything. So as we are going through this too, our employees and our team members are also going through this. So they have uncertainty about the stability of their job. Even if people are thinking, well, I'm in an essential healthcare field, or, we have changed everything to do this. Just the fact that in the past 3 or 4 weeks, so much has changed, there's so much uncertainty about what does the next 3 or 4 weeks hold. And so just keep in mind that that's always kind of underneath the surface of how your team is functioning, individuals in your team is functioning. Am I going to have a job? And with that, how much income am I going to lose? Even if I do have a job right now, if we're not generating money, if I'm not being productive, maybe they are, in a position where they are on a high commission rate for their work. How much income are they going to lose? And then with that, changes in their work. And so all of those things, and amidst all these other areas of uncertainty that we have, it was very, very clear in the research. A lot of distress, a lot of depression, anxiety, low self-esteem, and physical complaints. Now, what I want you all to think about is that from being in a leadership position in your work, you probably already know that when people experience this on a regular basis, when we are not in a crisis, that when they experience depression and anxiety and low self-esteem and physical complaints, that impacts their productivity. It impacts absenteeism. There's actually so much monetary loss for a company when our team is dealing with these mental health problems. And so for you as a leader, or even if you are not a leader on your team, if you are just someone of influence on your team, think about how you can offer some semblance of certainty, maybe not even in these areas, but just, certainty. And let's meet up on a Zoom meeting every Friday just to debrief for the week, just you and one of your colleagues. You don't have to be in a leadership position to start to build certainty into people's weekly routine. And if we can manage all of these all of these mental health aspects, our team is going to be functioning better. Okay. So there's just one thing that I also want to say is that if you as an employer do not have mental health coverage or employee assistance programs, that might be something that you want to think about. If you can add it in right now, that you can, and telehealth services for people so that they can deal with these issues. Okay, next slide. Okay, so if for you and for your team, I want to just go over some tips for managing your stress. This comes from the American Psychological Association, and this was specific to workplace stress, although it's just, they're good recommendations for any type of stress. But tracking your stressors by writing them down is a really important thing. The reason why that's important is because as you write down things that are stressing you out, it helps you make connections with the way that you're thinking about things, your feelings about them, the situation. It helps you know over time, how did I respond to this last time? And was my response productive? Did it actually reduce my stress? A lot of times our minds are going so fast that we don't really even know if the strategy we used was helpful, because we move on to the next thing. And before we know it, we already have more stress going on and we don't know how we dealt with the previous stress. So, this could be as simple or as complex as people want it to be. But tracking your stressors and writing them down is definitely very helpful, and it can slow your mind down a little bit. Develop healthy responses, physical activity, good sleeping habits, limiting alcohol use. Those are all things that I believe are easier said than done. A lot of times we believe that when we're under stress, we just have to keep working and we have to keep pushing. And that's actually not the best way to do it. When we have anxiety and when we have stress, it hangs out in our body. And you all can feel it. You guys probably have, neck tension and shoulder pain and back pain and all kinds of physical symptoms and poor sleep right now. But you actually need to do something to discharge that energy. So even if you can do 20 minutes of quick walking or dancing with your kids in the living room or something, or gardening even, get out there and do that stuff. That's going to help you sleep, but it's also going to discharge the physical energy that anxiety brings with it that tends to clog up your mind. Taking time to recharge. This can be really hard to do right now as well for a lot of people. And this might be something as simple as, just taking 20 minutes out for yourself and going on a light walk or laying down on the couch or your bed, scheduling a daily check-in with somebody over FaceTime or over Zoom, or just sitting outside in the quiet. That might be something good to do. But taking time to recharge goes hand in hand with the next bullet point of learning how to relax. And relaxation, we often think of as distraction, but that's not what relaxation actually is. When you relax, your body has an actual physical response to that relaxation. So you want to do something like meditation or deep breathing, prayer, journaling, doing a hobby that really lets your body relax. Because if you're just watching TV, or you're listening to a podcast, or you're scrolling Facebook, or you're watching the news, or anything like that, your mind is just continuing to spin. And if your mind is continuing to spin, all the energy from that, it goes into your body, and then they communicate back and forth, and they increase the effect of each other. And so make sure you're doing something where your body can relax, and that will allow your mind to relax at the same time. Okay, so turn off news sources, things like that. The next one is establish boundaries. This is related to if people are working at home, they need to have, as much as possible, boundaries that this is my office time and this is my home time. And I know that's not always easy, especially if right now you're homeschooling, or you're taking care of elderly parents or grandparents, things like that. It's not always easy. And this is where you might need to be creative in what those boundaries look like. Maybe some of those boundaries are, you get up earlier in the morning and you say, this amount of time is my work time, and I'm not going to worry about screen time for my kids. And then I'm going to shift over to another chunk of time, boundaries here. So you just have to kind of be creative about that. But you also need to, talk to your supervisor, talk to your other leadership team about how you're doing this, so that you can make a plan to how to effectively manage the stressors that you've identified. And if you've been writing down your stressors, it's going to be easier to have these conversations and to brainstorm and problem solve where you're at. Otherwise, you might say something like, I don't know, I just feel so overwhelmed. But even though that's good, that doesn't give you any solid information about how to be able to make change. And when we're feeling overwhelmed, one of the best antidotes to that is to be able to identify one thing, two things that we can make changes in and feel some degree of control around. So talk to people on your team, talk to your supervisors, offer the same things to people who work under you. Ask them how you can help them manage their stress and how you can help them set boundaries. And then finally, get support. A lot of people right now, even though we're all very connected, I think when people have so much anxiety and depression, people either do one of two things. They either lean towards people and they want to communicate a lot, or people pull back and they don't communicate very well at all. And so encourage regular time to connect with people, your friends, your family. If you need, more professional services, if you as an employer offer employee assistance, then you want to make sure that you're pushing that information out, not in an overwhelming way, but just in a very simple way. We have employee assistance program. Here's what it is. Here's how you get that started. And employee assistance is basically professional counseling services, but usually they're either 3 to 6 or 8 sessions that the company pays for. If you don't have that, then, ask yourself if you need to have some professional counseling, or suggest that to somebody on your team. There's a lot of counseling clinics. Our own counseling clinic, we are offering, in office as well as telehealth. And most counseling clinics are doing that. So there's a lot of resources. And if you're an employer, and if you can make any changes to your employees' healthcare, and you can add on telehealth services right now, that would be something that you could do to support your team. Not all healthcare plans cover telehealth, so that's really based on the employer. So those are some things that you can do for yourself to get some support, and to talk to your team about how they can support themselves and how you can help them. Okay, next slide. All right, and then how do you engage employees who are working remotely? This is such a hard thing, because if your company culture is one where people are communicating regularly, if they are, physically seeing each other often, it can be really lonely and increase that sense of depression and anxiety. So one of the things you want to do is transform your work environment into something positive. So, problem solving together about just, what is it like for you working from home? What is it like for you working in the office all by yourself or with only a couple people? That's happening a lot too. People are working in the office and no one else is there. And that's really lonely for some people. So what are you doing to make your environment more comfortable? I have a little fake plant here because I don't have a real plant. And so even though, it's fake, it's green, it reminds me of a plant. So I'm just trying to make my workspace more comfortable as I would in my office. You can encourage that your employees or your team members have more autonomy. And this can be hard if you're an employer and you're used to, having specific direction about how people work. But right now, because there's so much uncertainty, people need to feel like they have some degree of control. And so if you can offer them autonomy in terms of, their work schedule, how they're setting up boundaries, maybe if your goal is, we don't really care exactly when it gets done, it needs to be done by this Friday, or it needs to be done by this Wednesday. But when you do that, if you do that at midnight, or if you do that at 5 a.m., that's fine, because we know you've got, things at home that are pulling you and distracting you. They might be going to counseling twice a week, all kinds of things. But people need to have a semblance of control and autonomy. So the more that you can support that, that is going to make the work environment more positive for people. Providing updates. Again, like I said, making sure that your messages are simple, they're consistent, and as accurate as possible. Continuing to give people feedback. People want to hear from you. And so if you're asking them to do a new task or do a new task in a new way, they're going to be wanting feedback from you of how they're doing. And just having that feedback can decrease people's anxiety. People have so much anxiety about their productivity and if they don't hear from their leadership, are they not doing a good job? Does that mean I'm going to lose my job? You see how it just keeps rolling, it just goes and it kind of catastrophizes. So check in with people. If you're on the leadership end, check in with people, give them accurate feedback. If there's improvements that they can make, don't sugarcoat everything, but just in a kind, nice way. Give them feedback of how to make some improvements so that they can start to feel more confident and more competent, because that's what you want your employees to feel, competent and confident. And when you have those two things and people have some control, that is a big buffer for anxiety and depression. The last one in that middle section is reframing the effects of the crisis. So, you can reframe this and say, we're still working based on our values and as our goals as a company. And, it's really neat to be able to see how people have come up with these new systems and these process improvements and how we're still continuing to be efficient. And, talk about the wins. How many new clients do you have this month? Just give some positives, because there are positive things happening. And we as leadership, we need to remember to communicate that with our team. And that will also help us in leadership. That will help you by not being so overwhelmed with all the unknowns and the heavy responsibility of kind of holding people up, because that's a pretty heavy responsibility. And then increasing social support. So if, there's things that you can do to increase the connection among your team. In my office, we're using Marco Polo. And so we have a team Marco Polo, and it's kind of our water cooler chat, stuff that we would talk to each other about between sessions. And we're just doing that in all hours of the day and night. Sometimes, people don't have makeup on, we don't care anymore, but it's been really good just to not talk about the stressful things of work, but just to chit chat in that way. You also might want to plan a team social using Zoom. Maybe everybody meets up for desserts and drinks, and at 9 o'clock at night, you bring a cookie, or I don't know, but just be creative in how you guys can have social support and keep the team connected. That was one of the overarching. There were two things that were overarching in the research about workplace employee health during a crisis. Was one, a sense of autonomy, giving people an ability to make some changes, and then two, social support. So if you have those two things in place, your team is going to function better, your mental health will be better, and your team's mental health will be better. Okay, next slide. Okay, that's it. So let's open it up. We have about 15 or 20 minutes for some questions. And I'm going to open the chat box to see if there's any questions popping up here.
I haven't seen any questions yet.
Okay.
If anybody has a question, please feel free to ask Dr. Leedy at this time.
Let me ask you all a question. If anybody wants to answer, what are some of the things that you all are seeing in your company now that's really working to increase social support? How are you all doing that right now?
I would say one thing that we're doing at the chamber is Monday through Friday, every morning we have a team meeting at 8:30. So that gives us a chance to check in with each other and see what we're doing. And oh, look, there's Jason. And really get a chance to check up, and we talk more than just about what our duties are for the day, but we also kind of get a little bit of time to chit chat with each other and catch up on what's going on in our lives and tell funny stories or funny videos we've seen, and that's really been helpful.
Yeah. How are people handling things like, helping their team deal with boundaries between work and home with some of these new changes? One of the things that we're doing on our team is a lot of people have really, really modified when we're offering sessions. I'm starting counseling sessions at 7 a.m. on Wednesdays and Thursdays because a lot of my clients have had their work schedules changed, and also because my kids are still sleeping at that point. So I've moved a lot of my sessions early in the morning, and then have some more home time to homeschool in the afternoon, and then start back up later in the afternoon. So that's something that we've been doing different. A couple people are saying that their CEO is having a weekly prayer session to all 18 locations. That's amazing. Somebody else is going to be doing a morning coffee for the first time with their team on Thursday. That's a really great idea. Anything else people are doing?
I think being able to adjust when you work is important too, like you said, especially when you got kids and stuff at home. So like you said, waking up early and doing something at 7 in the morning, or just understanding that, if it's 5 or 6, 7 o'clock at night, you can still spend an hour to get things done when you know that everybody's in their rooms, on their phones, or watching the show or something. Being able to adjust your productivity level is important. We use Microsoft Teams a lot to communicate throughout the day as a staff, just kind of like almost like a text group.
Oh yeah, that's a good idea.
Well, hello, I'm Viola with Improving Lives Counseling, and I want to tell you that I really enjoyed the presentation because you basically described our employee, our services, and what we're doing are providing the services that you guys are talking about. We do understand that this is a trying time. We are providing telemed. And we also work with families and youth. So at this time, we are doing everything online. You can send all your paperwork in. It's awesome. I am not a leader. The company is actually Neil Ewan. However, this is a great opportunity to let you guys know our website is Improving Lives Counseling, and we welcome you to come and check us out.
Yeah, thank you. And that's I mean, there's so many counseling, clinics that are changing the way that we're doing things. So, if your employees are struggling, a lot of times they might not need long-term counseling. They might just need, 3 or 4 sessions, every other week, just to get the stress off, just to understand how their behavioral patterns are connecting with their thoughts and their feelings and how those all mix up. And sometimes people just need to be able to put that out and to see it laid out in front of them. And so, yeah, I think, improving lives, just everybody. And again, I would say that if your company doesn't have, EAP services or doesn't have telehealth counseling options, then see if that's something that you in leadership can change, that even if you can offer that in the short term right now, because people really need to be able to do counseling from wherever they're at and not come into the office, especially if they're immunocompromised. Does anybody want to say anything about just as being a leader in your company or an influence in your company, what that's been like for you to try to manage your own mental health while also managing or supporting the mental health of your team? I know that's a really vulnerable question.
I can tell you, and hi, Viora. I'm one of the leaders at Improving Lives Counseling Services, and it's been my responsibility to ensure that every single clinician has the tools and resources that they need in order to continue to help people through this crisis. And so it's been very stressful for me. I've had to put in a lot of long days and a lot of anxiety of my own, because I have to make sure that everything is done correctly. And so it's been hard, but just knowing that it is so that we can continue to help people, because everyone is experiencing this.
Right.
It's not just something that is, in a small area of Tulsa or Broken Arrow. It's nationwide, and everyone needs as much support as they can get, and we want to make sure that we're continuing to do that. We've changed a lot of our processes. We went online. We allowed all the therapists to decide what they wanted to do as far as seeing people online or in person or on the phone or whatever. We've offered alternatives to clients that didn't want to do online, but didn't necessarily feel safe coming into the office. We have a side door entrance so that they're not ever in any public areas and stuff like that. So it's just been a lot of trying to take care of everyone else and not necessarily taking care of my needs.
Yeah, and I think that's a really good point, that as leadership in your company, because there is so much that has to be done and things are changing, and you're trying to make sure everybody is okay, that oftentimes our own mental health needs are being neglected. And it's so much easier to say, well, do this. But then when it comes, whoever you are, when it comes to actually doing it, it's a lot harder to do. And I mean, I just had to remind myself of that yesterday. It's the first day of homeschooling, and I realized there's a reason I'm not a teacher. But before I went in for my own sessions yesterday, I had to take an hour and just, do some downtime and recharge and get ready. And it was hard for me to do that because I kept thinking, but I need to do this and this and this. And so I think that if you are in leadership or an influencer, it would be helpful if you could say, every day, or at least every other day, I'm going to be doing these 2 things for my own mental health, because that modeling, if you're asking for your employees to do that, the modeling that you are doing for them, even if they don't know exactly what they're doing, they're going to see the outcome of you taking care of your own mental health. And that is going to support the whole culture of your team and the productivity. And so just keep in mind that, there's absenteeism and loss of productivity. Those are definitely clearly linked to depression and anxiety and mental health problems. So as much as we can support this for our team, that our team is mentally healthy, we can help other people, and we can help our businesses thrive, as we're going through this. And that's what we want. We want to keep our businesses healthy, our community healthy, individuals healthy. And so we have a lot of influence that we can do here, but we also have to be the ones to lead the way and to model that behavior. So that's all I have.
Suggestions for how you can calm your mind, I guess, on that when you said, like, it was hard for me to stop and take this time for myself because I knew I had a million things to do.
Mm-hmm.
I know for myself, and I'm sure for a lot of these business leaders, it's hard for me to stop and take that time for myself because I feel like I have the livelihood of hundreds of people that I'm responsible for, and this has to be done.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So one of the, when you have that physical anxiety, I actually put a Facebook Live that I did last week, and then just a really brief one that I did this morning on this very topic on our Legacy Counseling Service business page. But breathing is one of the most powerful things you can do if you can learn to breathe correctly. So when you have that high anxiety, basically what I did yesterday is I sat down and I did some Headspace, which is a meditation app. There's also Calm and Insight Timer. And then I did about 2 or 3 minutes of deep breathing. And so basically that's where you are inhaling from your belly up through your chest, and you're kind of doing that slowly, and then you hold it for 3 or 4 counts, and then you very, very slowly exhale to all the way. And your exhale is usually, you want to try to double the length of your exhale. And so you do that 4, 5, 6, 7 times. And the more you do that, your body is going to be releasing that energy, and then that is going to help calm your mind. So even if that's the only thing you do as a leader, if you could do that, just take 10 minutes out a couple times a day, that is going to help you reconnect. I had to do that for myself because I was getting ready to see clients, and I couldn't be in the headspace where I was. So those are all great things. There's a ton of information online, and I've been, like I said, I've been doing some Facebook Lives, which I don't normally do, but I've been doing some of those on my business page with some ideas like that, and trying to teach people those things. So so I know we have just a couple minutes left. Lori, is there anything else, or anybody else have any other thoughts or questions?
I just wanted to thank you. This is incredibly important. I think, as just as alluded, we're so focused on surviving organizations or responding and helping others that as leaders we don't realize that we're going to help others by helping them pay attention to their mental health, and especially small organizations that don't have access to employee assistance programs and things like that. But and one thing that we did today, and I don't know what has been overwhelming to me in this environment, is the barrage of electronic communication. So, and allowing employees to shut off one so they can pay attention to another. That was something we did. I had to say today, like, I'm not going to look at emails because I have to work on projects, or, because we're getting text messages, emails, all these different types of electronic communications, trying to pay attention to social media or the news, who's going to come on live, right? We're all trying to process so much mass changing information in a short period of time, and allowing for us to be okay that we don't have to know it all and be it all, and that our employees' health is the most important. So thank you for that reminder and giving us tools and resources for that.
Yeah, you're welcome, Jennifer. I think that that's something really important, as much as you can chunk things together and say, I mean, the information overload right now is just, oh my gosh, there's just so much information coming out in so many different areas. And I think as much as you can chunk and say, you know, for this hour, I'm only going to look at this, and make sure you close your other tabs if you can, so that you're not tempted when you get a notification to check it. You know, that chunking of time, or your chunking of your tasks and blocking things out, is such a productive way to do your work. But it's also so good in mental health, because then at least you can feel like you've got a small win. If you can say, for this hour, I worked on this project and I wasn't distracted and I was really productive, that's a small win that you can take away that is just going to increase your sense of competence and confidence. And so, you know, these all seem like small things, but when you add them up and you keep doing them, and you can encourage your team to do them, and you know, it's going to help all of us get through this, and, you know, get our community back up and running again, and people healthy again. So
Thank you so much, Dr. Leedy, for leading this webinar. I think we all learned a lot, and we also have a lot of great techniques that we can use going forward.
you're welcome. Thanks for having me on.
Just a reminder, we do have a couple more webinars this week: Excelling Through Chaos tomorrow with Bill Fournette, and on Thursday, Resources for Workforce Resiliency. You can register for those on our website. If you need help registering, please feel free to reach out to me. I'd be happy to help. Once again, I'd like to thank our sponsors: GTR Media Group, IBT, Southwestern Payroll, Tulsa Tech, Tulsa Drillers, Lamar Advertising, Aero Exterminators, Hightower Business Solutions, and ABB Bank. Thank you so much, everyone, for joining us today. This webinar has been recorded, and we will be sending it out to you so you have all of the resources that you need. Hope you each have a great day. Thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye.